Start.
Morning students, today we are going to start the new lesson, that is Mother's Day. Before starting the lesson, let me ask you a question. How many of you appreciate your mother if she cooks nicely or if she dresses up very beautifully? How many of you say that? So generally we all neglect the mothers, isn't it? So let us see what is given in this lesson. And the present lesson is written by J.B. Priestley. Actually his full name is John Boynton Priestley Ohm. He is an English novelist, playwright and screenwriter and social commentator and very famous person. He was born in 1894 and died in 1984. So let us see what it is. Actually it is a satirical and humorous depiction of the status of the women, in particular a housewife in a family. So it is a satirical, a very humorously written, very funny way it is written, the condition of a lady housewife in a family. The following play is a humorous portrayal of the status of the mother in a family. Let us read on to see how Mrs. Pearson's family reacts when she tries to stand up for her own rights. The characters are Mrs. Annie Pearson, George Pearson, her husband, Doris Pearson, and then Cyril Pearson, the children, and Mrs. Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald is the neighbor. And the action takes place in the living room of Pearson's house in a London suburb. Suburb is an area that is outside the city. Time is the present. Scene, the living room of the Pearson family. Afternoon, it's a comfortably furnished, much lived-in room. Lived room means a living room in a small suburban semi-detached villa. If necessary, only one door need be used, but it is better with two, one up left leading to the front door and the stairs, and the other in the right wall leading to the kitchen and the back door. So you will get an idea about the Pearson's house. There can be a muslin covered window. Muslin is the cloth window in a left wall and possibly one on the right wall also. Muslin is the cloth, that is the curtain cloth, it is specified. The fireplace is assumed to be the fourth wall, and there is a settee up right. Settee is the sofa set, on an armchair down left and one down right. A small table with two chairs on either side of it stands at the center. This is their house. When the curtain rises, it is an afternoon in early autumn season. It is afternoon time, and the stage can be well lit. This is for the people who are interested in enacting this drama in the stage. Mrs. Pearson at right and Mrs. Fitzgerald at left are sitting opposite each other at the small table, on which are two teacups and saucers and the cards with which Mrs. Fitzgerald has been telling Mrs. Pearson's fortune. Telling fortune means astrologer, isn't it? Predicting the fortune. Mrs. Pearson is a pleasant but worried looking woman in her 40s. Mrs. Fitzgerald is older, heavier and strong and sinister personality. She is smoking. It is very important that these two should have sharply contrasting voices. Mrs. Pearson speaking in a light, flurried sort of tone. Flurried means nervous and confused. Sort of tone means kind of tone, with a touch of suburban cockney. Cockney is the way of speaking of London. And perhaps, and Mrs. Fitzgerald with a deep voice, rather Irish perhaps. These are the very important things. You have to be very particular about their voice. It is a very lengthy play, but still you should know about the specialities of Mrs. Pearson and Mrs. Fitzgerald, because this play is actually about changing the personality. That means I will tell you in Malayalam, that is കൂട് വിട്ട് കൂടുമാറുക എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ പണ്ട് നമ്മുടെ ഋഷിവര്യന്മാർ, അതായത് മുനികൾ, സന്യാസികൾ എന്ത് ചെയ്യുമായിരുന്നു, അവരുടെ ജീവൻ വേറൊരു ബോഡിയിലേക്ക് കൊണ്ടുപോകുമായിരുന്നു. മനസ്സിലായോ? ട്രാൻസ്ഫർ ചെയ്യും. ദേ ക്യാൻ ചേഞ്ച് ദെയർ personality into the different body, and they used to do so many works for that, isn't it? So this is also a sort of that thing. അതിന് മലയാളത്തിൽ പറയുന്നത് കൂട് വിട്ട് കൂട് മാറുക എന്നാണ്. Let us begin the play. Mrs. Fitzgerald. Mrs. Fitzgerald is the neighbor of Mrs. Pearson, collecting up the cards because she's learned about astrology, so she can predict the things. She is collecting the cards, and that is all I can tell you, Mrs. Pearson. Could be a good fortune, could be a bad one. All depends on yourself. No, everything is depends on you. It is in your hands. You can make the life better or worst. Make up your mind. Make up your mind means decide, and there it is. So you decide first. It is in your hands. That's what who said, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Mrs. Pearson. Yes, thank you, Mrs. Fitzgerald. I am much obliged. Obliged means I am grateful to you. I am sure it is wonderful having a real fortune teller. Fortune teller is astrologer living next door. Did you learn that out east too? Did you learn the astrology in the eastern side? That's what she asked. She said that she is very thankful towards Mrs. Fitzgerald, and she is very happy because she is having a fortune teller as a neighbor. Next page. Mrs. Fitzgerald, I did 12 years I had of it. So she said, Mrs. Fitzgerald said that she learnt astrology 12 years. With my old man rising to be lieutenant quartermaster, he learnt a lot. And I learned a lot more. Even with my old man is her husband, he became lieutenant quartermaster. That is the post in the defense. And he learned a lot. He also learned, and I learned a lot more. So I learned more than my husband learned. About what? About astrology. But will you make up your mind now, Mrs. Pearson dear? Are you ready to follow the instructions given by me? That's what who is asking? Mrs. Fitzgerald asked Mrs. Pearson. Put your foot down. Put your foot down means assert yourself once and for all, and be the mistress of your own house and the boss of your own family. So be the owner of your own house and be the boss of your own family. So don't be very submissive. That's what who is saying? Mrs. Fitzgerald asked whom to be? Mrs. Pearson. Smiling apologetically, that is easier said than done. She said that it is very easy to tell me to be bold, but it is very difficult to behave. Besides, I am so fond of them, even if they are so thoughtless and selfish, they don't mean to be. So Mrs. Pearson is saying that I am very much attached to my family members, even though they are very selfish. So she knew very well that her family members are very selfish and they are not giving her the due respect, but still she doesn't want to hurt her family members. Mrs. Fitzgerald, cutting in, maybe not, but it would be better for them if they learn to treat you properly. So Mrs. Fitzgerald is saying that they should learn. Who should learn? Mrs. Pearson's family members should learn how to behave with Mrs. Pearson. Mrs. Pearson, yes, I suppose it would, in a way. I think so. I also think like that. Mrs. Fitzgerald, no doubt about it at all. Who is the better for being spoiled grown man, lad or girl, the boy or a girl? Nobody. You think it does them good when you run after them all the time. So she is saying that Mrs. Fitzgerald is the neighbor. She knew everything about Mrs. Pearson. She is saying that you are always behind your husband and the son and the daughter. You are doing all the work at home. Take their orders as if you were the servant in the house. How do you behave? You are behaving as if you are the servant of your son, daughter and husband. Stay at home every night while they go out enjoying themselves. They are not asking you to, or they are not taking you outside. Only Mrs. Pearson is to be at home always. The husband is to go out alone. The daughter is to go out alone. And the son is to go out alone. But nobody used to take along whom Mrs. Pearson with them. Never in all life. It is the ruin of them as well as you. Husbands, sons, daughters should be taking notice of wives and mothers, not giving them orders and treating them like dirt. So nowadays the children, what are they doing? The husbands, what are they doing? They are treating the housewife, mother as dirt, the wife as dirt. And don't tell me you don't know what I mean. for I know more than you have told me. So Mrs. Fitzgerald is saying, I am observing everything, what is happening in your house, your son or your daughter, both of them are not treating you as a mother. They are not bothered to take you outside. You don't have any entertainment. Your husband also goes alone outside, and your daughter goes alone, and the son goes alone. Nobody is giving you the due respect. Then Mrs. Pearson, dubiously. Dubiously means in a doubtful manner. I keep dropping a hint. Dropping means telling. I am giving them hint in between. That's what Mrs. Pearson said. Mrs. Fitzgerald, hint. It is more than hints your family needs, Mrs. Pearson. If you are giving hints, that is not sufficient. That's what who is saying? Mrs. Fitzgerald is saying. So, Mrs. Pearson, are you giving hints to your son, daughter and the husband? That is not at all sufficient. Mrs. Pearson, dubiously, in a very doubtful manner. I suppose it is, but I do hate any unpleasantness, because Mrs. Pearson doesn't want to create any unpleasant atmosphere at home. And it is so hard to know where to start. I keep making up my mind to have it out with them, but somehow I don't know how to begin. She glances at her watch or at a clock. Oh, good gracious. Good gracious means expression of surprise. Look at the time, nothing is ready and they will be home any minute, and probably all in a hurry to go out again. So she was talking to Mrs. Fitzgerald. By the time in between, Mrs. Pearson is looking at the watch and realizing that the time is too late. Now this is the time to who is to come back home, the father, the son and the daughter. So she has to cook for them. So she is telling Mrs. Fitzgerald they will come back home, and at the same moment they will go out also. So I have to prepare something for them. So as she is about to rise, she was about to rise from the chair, Mrs. Fitzgerald reaches out across the table and pulls her down. She is not allowing Mrs. Pearson to get up from the chair. Mrs. Fitzgerald, let them wait or look after themselves for once. This is where your foot goes down. Start now. So she lights a cigarette from the one she has just finished. So who is to smoke also? Mrs. Fitzgerald is to smoke also. She is not allowing Mrs. Pearson to get out of the chair and to do the work. She said that let them come back home and let them do their own work. You don't have to do the work for them. Let them realize the importance of your presence. They are not realizing, they are treating you like a servant. Mrs. Pearson, embarrassed, in confusion. Mrs. Fitzgerald, I know you mean well. In fact, I agree with you, but I just can't. It is no use you trying to make me. If I promise you I had really have it out with them, I know I wouldn't be able to keep my promise. So, Mrs. Fitzgerald, I know you mean well. I know that it is you are speaking for myself, but I agree with you whatever you are speaking, but it's very difficult for me to behave rudely with my family members. Even though I promised you that I will behave, but it is not possible for me to behave very rudely to my family members. Mrs. Fitzgerald, then let me do it. If it is very difficult for you to behave very rudely, then let me do it. I will do it. Mrs. Pearson, flustered, worried. Oh no, thank you very much, Mrs. Fitzgerald, but that wouldn't do at all. It couldn't possibly be somebody else. They resent. They resent means they feel angry at once and wouldn't listen, and really I couldn't blame them. I know I ought to do it, but you see how it is. She looks apologetically across the table, smiling rather miserably. She said that it's not possible for you to come and do everything or behave rudely to my family members because my family members will get angry. So Mrs. Fitzgerald coolly, you haven't got the idea. So she is saying what I am going to tell you that you are not getting. Mrs. Pearson, bewildered, confused. Oh, I am sorry. I thought you asked me to let you do it. So I thought that you will come home, my home, and you do whatever I am supposed to do it. Mrs. Fitzgerald, I did, but not as me, but as you. Yes, I will come to your house, but not as me, but as you. How is it possible? Mrs. Pearson, but I don't understand. You couldn't be me. Mrs. Fitzgerald, coolly, we changed the places or really bodies. You look like me, I look like you. But that is impossible. How do you know? Do you ever tried it out? No, of course not. Mrs. Fitzgerald, coolly, I have. Not for some time, but it still won't work. Won't last long. but long enough for what we want to do. Learnt it out east, of course, where there up to all these tricks. She holds her hand out across the table, keeping the cigarette in her mouth. Jim your hands, dear. Jim your hands, dear means give me your hands. What actually Mrs. Fitzgerald is planning? Mrs. Fitzgerald said that I will be going to your home as yourself, as Mrs. Pearson. How is it possible? Because this is called what? Changing the personality. That means the body is who's Mrs. Pearson, but the soul will be transferred. Whose soul? Mrs. Fitzgerald's soul will be transferred, or will be transferred to whose body? Mrs. Pearson's body, and Mrs. Pearson's soul will be transferred to Mrs. Fitzgerald. So when Mrs. Pearson goes to her house, and actually how will she behave? She will behave like whom? She will behave like Mrs. Fitzgerald, because it is not only her body is there, Mrs. Pearson's body is there, but inner self is who is there? Mrs. Fitzgerald is there. That's what they are planning. Let us see. Mrs. Pearson dubiously, well, I don't know, is it right? ഇങ്ങനെ ചെയ്യുന്നത് ശരിയാണോ? നമ്മളങ്ങനെ ആൾമാറാട്ടം ചെയ്യുന്നത് ശരിയാണോ? Mrs. Fitzgerald, it is your only chance. Give me your hands and keep quiet in a minute. Just don't think about anything. Taking her hands, now look at me. They stare at each other. Kandvarum Mohatodu Mohan Nokana. Muttering. Arshata dam, Arshata lam, Arshata lam dum bhona. These are the what? Mantras. Who is speaking? Uttering? Mrs. Fitzgerald is speaking. So because Mrs. Fitzgerald had learned this changing the personality in the eastern side. Now she is saying, she is holding the hands of Mrs. Pearson and going to change the personalities. That is, Mrs. Fitzgerald's personality will go in the body of Mrs. Pearson, and Mrs. Pearson's personality will go back to whose body? Mrs. Fitzgerald. Understood? Now this little scene should be acted very carefully. We are to assume that the personalities change bodies. All the spell has been spoken. Both women still grasping hands, holding the hands, go lax. Lax means loose, as if the life were out of them. Then both come to life, but with the personality of the other. Each must try to adopt the voice and mannerisms of the other. So now Mrs. Pearson is bold and dominating, and Mrs. Fitzgerald is nervous and fluttering. So how it is so? Because inside the body of Mrs. Pearson, whose personality is there? Mrs. Fitzgerald is there. And Mrs. Fitzgerald's body, whose personality is there? Mrs. Pearson's personality is there. I hope you understood. So you have to be very careful. Now it is Mrs. Pearson is speaking, but only her body is there. Actually, who is speaking? Mrs. Fitzgerald. Why? Because inside Mrs. Pearson's body, whose personality is there? Mrs. Fitzgerald's is there. Mrs. Pearson. Now with Mrs. Fitzgerald's personality, see what I mean, dear? She notices the cigarette. Now who is smoking? Now Mrs. Pearson is speaking, because actually only the body is Mrs. Pearson, but the personality is Mrs. Fitzgerald's. Here, you don't want that. She snatches it and puts it in her own mouth, puffing contentedly. Contentedly means satisfactorily. So she had taken the cigarette from whom? Mrs. Fitzgerald. She is inside her body. Whose personality is there? Mrs. Pearson's. And Mrs. Pearson started smoking. Mrs. Fitzgerald, now with Mrs. Pearson's personality, looks down at herself and sees that her body has changed. Gives a scream of fright. Who was afraid now? Mrs. Pearson. Because her personality is transferred to Mrs. Fitzgerald's body. So first time she is experiencing such a changing of personality. Mrs. Fitzgerald with Mrs. Pearson's personality. Oh, it is happened. Mrs. Pearson complacently. Of course, it is happened. Very neat. Didn't know I had it in me. Mrs. Fitzgerald alarmed. But whatever shall I do, Mrs. Fitzgerald? George and the children can't see me like this. Mrs. Pearson grimly. Grimly means harshly. They are not going to. That is the point. They will have me to deal with. Only they won't know it. Because she said that you don't have to worry about it, because in your home I will be there in your body, with your body. So they cannot recognize me. Mrs. Fitzgerald, still alarmed. But what if we can't change back? It would be terrible. So Mrs. Fitzgerald's body, who is there? Mrs. Pearson's personality is there. She is worried because if they cannot transfer back, what will happen? Mrs. Pearson, here, steady Mrs. Pearson. If you had to live my life, it would be so bad. You would have been more fun as me than you have had as you. Mrs. Fitzgerald, yes. But I don't want to be anybody else. Mrs. Pearson doesn't want to live a life of whom? Live a life of Fitzgerald. Mrs. Pearson, now stop worrying. It is easier changing back. I can do it anytime we want. Okay. She said that you don't have to worry. Mrs. Pearson, it is very easy to return back to your own body. Then Mrs. Fitzgerald, inside the body, whose personality is there? Mrs. Pearson. What did she say? Well, do it now. Mrs. Pearson, not likely. I have got to deal with your family first. That is the idea, isn't it? I changed the personality because I wanted to teach a lesson to your family members. Well, I will show you, Mrs. Fitzgerald. But what am I going to do? Then she said that if you are staying in my house, what will I do? Mrs. Pearson, go into my house for a bit. There is nobody there, then pop back and see how we are doing. Pop back means move back suddenly. You want to enjoy it. Better get off now before one of them comes. You go back to my house. That's what who said? Mrs. Fitzgerald. Mrs. Fitzgerald, that is whom actually? Mrs. Pearson, nervously rising. Yes, I suppose that is best. You are sure it will be all right? Mrs. Pearson, chuckling. Chuckling means laughing. It will be wonderful. Now off you go, dear. Go back. Go to my home. Mrs. Fitzgerald crosses and hurries out through the door right. Left to herself, Mrs. Pearson smokes away, lighting another cigarette, and begins laying out the cards of patience on the table. After a few moments, Doris Pearson comes bursting in left. She is a pretty girl in her early 20s who would be pleasant enough if she had not been spoiled. Mrs. Fitzgerald actually, who is there inside her body? Mrs. Pearson. She went to Mrs. Fitzgerald's house, and Mrs. Pearson was smoking, is sitting and smoking, and by the time her daughter enters, what's the name of the daughter? Doris. Doris, before she has taken anything in, Mom, you will have to iron my yellow silk. I must wear it tonight. She now sees what's happening and is astounded. Astounded means surprised. What are you doing? She moves down left center. She had suddenly observed that her mother is smoking. Actually, Mrs. Pearson's body, whose personality is there? Mrs. Fitzgerald. She is smoking. Actually, so she is saying that you go and iron my dress. I have to go outside. Mrs. Pearson now uses her ordinary voice, but her manner is not fluttering and apologetic, but cool and incisive. So, incisive means very sharp. Mrs. Pearson is speaking very sharply to the daughter. Not even looking up. What would you think I am doing? Whitewashing the ceiling. Doris, still astounded. But you are smoking? So she said that, what are you doing? You asked me. What am I doing? Am I whitewashing the wall? So then the daughter said that, no, you are smoking. First time she is observing her mother smoking. Mrs. Pearson, that's right, dear. No law against it. Is it there? Is there any, am I doing anything against the law? Doris, but I thought you did not smoke. So the daughter is astonished because she had never seen her mother smoking. Mrs. Pearson, then you thought wrong. Then you are thinking it's not correct. Doris, are we having tea in the kitchen? Mrs. Pearson, have it where you like, dear. Wherever you want to have tea, you have it. It is not there in the kitchen, because Doris expected that her mother generally makes tea for her. Mrs. Pearson, yours is not. I have had all I want. Might go out later and get a square meal at the Clarendon. Clarendon means hotel. So she said that not only tea, you go outside and have even food outside from the hotel. Doris hardly believing her ears. Who will go? Mrs. Pearson, I might. Who do you think? So she said that I have had all I want. Mrs. Pearson is saying that I had my tea also. Even I might go out in the hotel and have my dinner also. So who was astonished to hear this? Doris was astonished. Who is Doris? Mrs. Pearson's daughter. Then Mrs. Pearson said very clearly, yes, I might go outside and have my dinner. Who would you think? Why? What is her problem? Doris staring at her mom. What's the matter with you? Doris is asking her, what's the problem with you? Don't be silly. Doris indignantly means angrily. It is not me that is being silly, and I must say it is a bit much when I have been working hard all day and you can't even bother to get my tea ready. Did you hear what I said about my yellow silk? So Doris is a daughter of Pearson, Mrs. Pearson, very angry. She said that from morning to evening I am working and I came back from the work, and can't you even make a tea for me? Can't you even press my yellow dress? The daughter is asking the mother to do all the things, and she is not thinking that the mother is also doing all the household work, isn't it? And Mrs. Pearson, no, don't you like it now? I never did. I will not do it. Miss Doris indignantly, of course, I like it. And I am going to wear it tonight, so I want it ironed. So she said that I wanted to wear that particular dress tonight. Want it iron? What do you think it is going to do? Iron itself? No, you are going to iron it for me? You always do. So Doris is demanding. You always used to press my clothes. Go and iron my clothes. Mrs. Pearson. Why is Mrs. Pearson behaving like this? Because inside the Pearson's body, it is not the actual Pearson's personality is there. Whose personality is inside? Mrs. Fitzgerald's. Mrs. Fitzgerald wanted to teach a lesson to whom? Teach a lesson to the children of Mrs. Pearson, because Mrs. Pearson's children and the husband were not giving much attention to their lady. That's why Mrs. Pearson, well, this time I don't talk rubbish to me. And don't talk rubbish to me. You are nobody to order me about working hard. I have a good idea how much you do. Doris Pearson, I put in twice the hours you do and get no wages, no thanks for it. She said that I am doing the double work than you yourself. But I never got any gratitude or thanks to me. Never paid back. Why are you going to wear your yellow silk? Where are you going? So she asked, where are you going? Why are you wearing the same dress? Doris sulkily, out with Charlie Spence. I wanted to go out with my boyfriend. Why? Widely. Why? What is the matter with you? Why shouldn't I go out with Charlie Spence? If he asked me and I want to, any objections? Gone. You might as well tell me. The daughter is very rude. She said that, who are you to stop me? Who are you to ask me why I am going out with my boyfriend? Mrs. Pearson, severely, can't you find anybody better? She's asking, can't you get any other boyfriend? I wouldn't be seen dead with Charlie Spence. Buck teeth and half-witted. From where did you get this buck teeth person? That means the teeth used to be outside. He is not. Doris is getting very angry because mother is teasing her boyfriend. When I was young as your age, I would have found somebody better than Charlie Spence or given myself up as a bad job. Doris, oh, shut up. She's in tears. She started crying because her mother started teasing her boyfriend, Charlie Spence, as what? As buck teeth and half-witted person. He is not a jolly good fellow. Why are you going behind this Charlie Spence? Doris runs out left. Mrs. Pearson chuckles and begins putting the cards together. She started crying and Mrs. Pearson was laughing and arranging the cards. After a moment, Cyril Pearson enters left. He is the masculine counterpart of Doris. Masculine counterpart of Doris means Doris' brother. What is the name of Doris' brother? Cyril Pearson. So by the time who started coming to the house, Cyril came into the house. I hope you understood. It is a very funny play. Please read it. If you have any doubts, you can ask me. We will continue the next class. Thank you.